We just got new information about the fundraising numbers that Vice President Harris's campaign is expected to report for August. A source telling CNN the final number will be more than double what the Trump campaign already reported. The Trump team said they took in $130 million last month. That information comes the same day that the former president delivered a speech before the Economic Club of New York, which was billed as his vision for the economy. Keeping him honest, much of what he said involved either nostalgia for his first term in office or mirrored comments we've heard in his previous campaigns, including to cut taxes as well as regulations, without a lot of specifics. He also leaned heavily on the idea that tariffs can pay for trillion-dollar tax cuts, despite the fact that idea has alarmed many mainstream economists. No details on how he plans to get gasoline, quote, below $2 a gallon. But the most interesting comment he made today may have been his response to a very clear and concise question on how to help Americans afford the expense of childcare. It's kind of an absolute word salad. Here's just part of his answer.
Can you commit to prioritizing legislation to make childcare affordable? And if so, what specific piece of legislation will you advance?
Well, I would do that, and we're sitting down. I was somebody, we had Senator Marco Rubio, and my daughter Ivanka was so impactful on that issue. It's a very important issue. But I think when you talk about the kind of numbers that I'm talking about, that, because the child care is child care, there's something, you have to have it. In this country, you have to have it. But when you talk about those numbers compared to the kind of numbers that I'm talking about by taxing foreign nations at levels that they're not used to, but they'll get used to it very quickly. And it's not going to stop them from doing business with us, but they'll have a very substantial tax when they send product into our country. Those numbers are so much bigger than any numbers that we're talking about, including childcare, that it's going to take care of. We're going to have, I look forward to having no deficits within a fairly short period of time.
So the question was on specific legislation for childcare. He actually went on for another 53 seconds with that answer, but you get the gist. Joining us now, Jamal Simmons, a former communications director to Vice President Harris, and Safar Griffin, former Trump White House communications director, and Scott Jennings, a former special assistant to President George W. Bush. And what did you make of the economic speech today?
Well, that specific answer was as unintelligible as any of the worst moments in the Biden debate, that afterward many of us said Joe Biden should consider stepping aside. There was not a policy proposal. I think he was referring to extending the child tax credit when he referred to his daughter, but couldn't remember what the specific policy was. And this is a very real issue to American voters. If you're, a couple that has kids, many parents choose to forgo one parent working because it's actually cheaper for one to stay home. You also have the sandwich generation where they're helping with their aging parents as well as dealing with their children. And there was not a single answer offered there. So, if this is the kind of message we should expect in the debate, I think the American public is going to realize he's really short on details and doesn't have a lot of answers. I imagine his folks are putting some policy papers in front of him to try to clean up what he's trying to say there.
Scott, it's interesting to have a speech, at this, group, his vision for the economy, and yet, again, so many of his supporters say they want to hear specifics. There's just not a lot of specifics.
Well, he wasn't crisp on that one specific issue, I'll admit, but he did lay out a series of things, making his tax cuts that he passed in his term permanent. He talked about terminating the Inflation Reduction Act, which, by the way, Joe Biden admitted today they totally lied about. He admitted they should have called it a climate change bill. But he talked about terminating that and giving back unspent funds. He talked about cutting regulations. He talked about unleashing more domestic energy production. So he did give a speech today, and it gave you an idea of the kinds of economic principles that he would put in place.
Right, but it's easy with a broad brush.
They would improve the economy.
It's easy with a broad brush, Jamal, to say, as he did in 2016, on day one, I'm going to eliminate Obamacare. It's going to be so easy, and immediately we'll have something else that, it's easy to say all this stuff. The devil's in all the details.
It is. It's funny to me because they clearly have been trying to lay on the vice president this mantle that she's not serious. That
she's certainly had some word salad answers. Of
course. But that she's been on this campaign. She's doing rallies and nobody's paying attention. She's been putting policy out and people are getting it. The Trump campaign is trying to put policy out, but it's just not really working because the candidate won't stay on it. So instead, Al Gore called, I think he wants his policy back. He's put out this efficiency thing with Elon Musk at the head of the Efficiency Council, which sounds a lot like Al Gore's reinventing government proposal back in 1993 that cut $100 billion out of government spending. I think Trump is recycling things because they just don't have anything new, and they're just reacting to what the Harris campaign is doing.
Do you think, I mean, Alyssa, do you think that idea of, you know, Elon Musk, like, overseeing the government, I mean, does that appeal to voters, you think?
I don't know that it appeals. Well, I can't speak to if it appeals to voters, but I can say this: it's not going to happen. He's not going to go through an SF-86 process, a background check to disclose his assets, and then go work in the federal government and have to give up certain investments. So it's kind of just something you say to target a certain segment of the voter population that loves Elon Musk. But Donald Trump is really throwing things at a wall to see what sticks. It's much like this announcement and proclamation that he's going to make IVF either paid for by the federal government or he's going to force insurance companies to cover it.
He's also going to release the JFK files, which he also said he would release in 2016.
I remember sitting in the Oval while he was discussing in 2020 releasing the JFK files, and it never happened. Many of these things, by the way, that he talks about require acts of Congress. We don't know what the makeup of Congress is going to look like, but it certainly won't be easy, as we learned with repealing Obamacare.
Scott, the first ballots in North Carolina are supposed to start going out tomorrow. That may be delayed because of a request from RFK Jr. to have his name removed from the ballot. If it's decided that his name remains on, do you think that could hurt Trump in North Carolina? Because, I mean, obviously, RFK Jr. is supporting Trump and wants his followers to vote in the battleground states for Trump.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if a few thousand people, choose that line on the ballot and the race is decided by a few thousand folks, yeah, I mean, I think all these states are going to be incredibly close, so any kind of things that happen with the ballots, names on, names off, could make a difference. If I may just go back on the efficiency issue, I actually do think voters want to hear a president of the United States say, maybe the federal government does need to be more efficient. Maybe we do waste money. Maybe it's too big. Maybe we need to take a look top to bottom to see if we've been stacking bureaucracy on top of bureaucracy for so long that we have no idea what's working. So I think as a matter of what will voters say to this, and I don't know if Elon Musk is going to run it or the right person to run it or whatever, but they do believe that outsiders, business people, folks from the private sector might have something to say about how government could run more efficiently. It's one of the allures of Trump in the first place. Trump, the businessman, it's why they think he would be good at managing the economy. So I do think there's some appeal to it politically.
But we've all been around long enough to know that every person running for president has talked about, waste and inefficiency, and that's how they're going to, reduce the deficit. That's how, that's always been the throw line in debates of like, well, I'm going to be relentless on, it also, the Elon Musk reference goes back to 2016 when Trump was talking about Carl Icahn, that Carl Icahn's going to be in the government, and, it's going to be all these business leaders that he reaches out to. That didn't really pan out.
I'll just tell you, Al Gore spent 5 years, from 1993 to 1998, a 2,000-page report that collapsed and combined 800 agencies, saved $100 billion. I was in the 2000 campaign for Al Gore. It didn't work out very well, right? It wasn't that good. American public just doesn't really care that much about that when they have real concerns for their own personal lives they want the president to address.
Jamal Simmons and Sora Griffin, thank you. Scott Jennings, always up next.